Mondays have never been my cup of tea, and today feels particularly rough. Peggy, my wife, appeared unusually somber as she went about her morning routine. She seemed lost in thought, her actions mechanical rather than deliberate. It cast a shadow over the morning, leaving me perplexed as to the cause of her mood. As my sons, Robert and Dave, headed off to school, I made my way to work, a freight company where I've toiled for 15 years. My job involves loading and unloading container ships, a laborious but decently paying endeavor. Yet, despite the stability it offers, there's a persistent yearning within me for adventure, a desire to explore distant shores. It's a passion I've harbored for years, one that sometimes weighs heavily on my mind, especially on days like today. The challenges at work are compounded by certain coworkers, notably Colin and his cohorts. Their penchant for troublemaking has irked me since our high school days, and it hasn't changed over the years. Colin wasted no time in needling me about a party I missed over the weekend, a decision driven by familial obligations. His jab struck a nerve, reminding me of recent personal losses and the mundane routine that sometimes feels suffocating. As Colin's taunts continued, I felt my temper simmering beneath the surface. It's a struggle I've faced throughout my life, the battle to maintain composure in the face of provocation. And today, as Colin's words cut deeper than usual, I found myself grappling with the urge to respond in kind, to lash out in frustration. But I resisted, knowing that such actions would only exacerbate the situation. Instead, I focused on the tasks at hand, pushing through the day with determination and resolve. Yet beneath the facade of normalcy, there lingered a sense of discontent, a nagging feeling that something was amiss. It wasn't just about work or Colin's provocations, it was a deeper, more existential unease, a longing for something more, something elusive, yet essential to my sense of fulfillment. As the day wore on, I found myself reflecting on the choices that had brought me to this point in life, the sacrifices made, and the dreams deferred. And amidst the chaos of the day, there emerged a glimmer of clarity, a realization that true happiness lies not in external validation or material success, but in the pursuit of one's passions and the cultivation of meaningful connections. And so, as I navigated the challenges of the day, I resolved to hold fast to my dreams, to seek solace in the love of my family, and to embrace the uncertainties of the future with courage and conviction. For even in the darkest of moments, there exists the promise of a brighter tomorrow, if only we have the faith to believe in it. I turned away, hoping to ignore Colin's antics, but he persisted. He tossed something in my direction, a pair of red panties. Peggy left these behind on Saturday, he jeered, igniting laughter among his companions. I stood there, refusing to acknowledge the red silk lying on the ground. I felt my breath catch, my stomach knotting with tension. Rage simmered within me, coiling like a spring ready to snap. I knew I could take on any one of them individually, but facing them as a group felt overwhelming. In that moment, I didn't care. I began to move toward them, steeling myself for confrontation, when a firm hand gripped my shoulder. It was Josh Hamilton, the foreman. Wordlessly, he gestured toward the main office. With a fierce glare at Colin's group, I followed Josh upstairs. Their laughter faded into worried expressions as we entered Henry Clark's office. I took a seat across from his secretary, Sally. "Grady, would you like a cup of coffee?" she offered. "No thanks," I replied curtly. "I'm too upset to hold a cup right now." Through the glass partition, I could see Josh and Henry engaged in a serious discussion. I turned my attention back to Sally. "Were you at the party on Saturday night?" I asked. She nodded reluctantly. "Can you tell me what happened?" "I'm completely clueless, and Peggy hasn't said a word." I pressed. Sally hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "Grady, I really shouldn't get involved. This is something you should discuss with your wife," she evaded. "But Sally, you were there. You witnessed everything. Please, just give me a hint," I pleaded. She shuffled some papers on her desk, avoiding eye contact. "Please, Sally, I need to know," I insisted. Finally, she relented. "Well, Peggy showed up at the party looking stunning. But after about an hour, Colin started pushing drinks on her," she revealed. She appeared to be enjoying herself as Colin whispered to his buddies, sneaking more drinks, which invariably led to uproarious laughter. Eventually, Peggy and Colin slipped away into the back storeroom. About 30 minutes later, Bob, Ray, and Freddie followed suit. We didn't see any of them for an hour until they all remerged, laughing and joking. Peggy wore a smile, but she seemed disheveled, her hair unkempt, her dress wrinkled. About 10 minutes later, Peggy and Colin left together. "Thanks, Sally." "I didn't want to hear that, but it makes sense," I said resignedly. We sat in silence for another 10 minutes until Josh came out and gestured for me to come in. "Grady, I'm not pleased with what happened this morning," he began. "Colin, Ray, Bob, and Freddie each received a week off without pay. I'm giving you 2 weeks of vacation. I heard about what happened on Saturday, and I assume this is news to you. I can't risk anyone getting hurt. I don't blame you for any of this, but I expect you to sort things out before returning. I'll do whatever I can to support you through this. Now, get out of here," he concluded. I nodded my thanks to Henry and Sally as I exited the office. Colin and his crew were nowhere to be seen as I headed to the parking area. I left the panties on the dock and decided not to go home. Instead, I drove north, searching for a place where I could find solace. It gave me plenty of time to reflect on the past and the present. Peggy and I were classmates in high school. She was large, overweight, and messy, not conventionally attractive. Lacking grooming skills and the knack for makeup, her hair was always a mess, and she didn't fit in with any of the popular groups, making her somewhat of a social outcast. Ironically, that's what drew me to her. I was a big guy, towering at 6 and weighing close to 300 pounds. Awkward, shy, and not particularly athletic, sports weren't my thing due to my clumsiness. Colin Farrell, on the other hand, was the opposite. Handsome, charismatic, and athletic, there were rumors that girls wanted Colin to be their first experience. Despite not having a steady girlfriend, he always had a date. I couldn't stand him. He'd boast about his conquests, and the girls seemed impressed. Then there was Peggy. She'd hoped Colin would take her out, wanting to claim him as her first. However, Colin not only rejected her but publicly humiliated her by telling everyone about it, calling her derogatory names. The school found it amusing, but Peggy was devastated. I saw this as my opportunity to step in, since I wasn't familiar with the dating game. I chose to take a friendly approach with Peggy. Over time, our bond deepened, and by the end of high school, we were an item. After graduation, I found work in construction. Within a year, I shed my excess weight and gained a more muscular physique, shedding the stigma of being ridiculed. Peggy and I exchanged vows not long after. Our sons, Robert and Dave, arrived soon after, prompting Peggy to embark on a fitness journey. Her transformation was remarkable, mastering the art of hairstyling, makeup application, and dressing elegantly. She became a vision of beauty, and I felt a sense of pride in calling her my spouse. My affection for her persisted before and after her physical transformation, elevating her to the status of a princess in my eyes. Upon securing a job at the loading dock, our lives took a positive turn. However, as I drove down the A1 highway that day, I found myself navigating towards a predetermined destination. Thoughts of our sons lingered in my mind. They inherited our resilience and discipline. We instilled in them the importance of self-control and compassion, nurturing their dreams of navigating the open seas. Peggy, a pillar of strength, managed our household with finesse, prioritizing prudent spending and efficient management. Our intimate life appeared fulfilling, at least in my perception. Our moments together held satisfaction, contributing to my overall contentment in our relationship. Driving along the M6, the long stretch of road seemed to extend endlessly before me, each passing mile elongating the shadows as the day wore on. With the sun gradually sinking below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the landscape, I pressed on towards my destination, Port Patrick. Despite the daunting 7-hour journey ahead, it was the only place I yearned to be at that moment, a beacon of solace amidst the turmoil of my thoughts. Spotting the familiar sign for the S75, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. As I turned onto the road, the anticipation of reaching my destination before nightfall grew stronger. Alongside the S75, there were ample parking spots, a welcome sight for weary travelers like myself. Pulling into a spot near the Duke's Inn, I sighed with a mixture of exhaustion and determination. Entering the inn, I was greeted by the friendly bartender, who I handed my keys to as I requested a room for the week. Despite lacking any luggage or personal belongings, save for the clothes on my back, I was grateful for the prospect of a place to rest my head. The bartender retrieved a room key and hung my car keys behind the bar, a gesture that didn't go unnoticed. With a pint in hand, I made my way to a secluded corner of the inn, seeking refuge from the outside world. The amber light filtering through the bottle glass window beside me created a comforting ambience, casting a warm glow over my surroundings. As I sank into the worn leather chair, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief wash over me. In the days that followed, I found myself falling into a routine of sorts, the passing of time marked only by the rising and setting of the sun. Each morning, I would wake up in my room, the memories of the previous night's events hazy and indistinct. More often than not, a kind local would assist me up the stairs and onto the bed, where I would lay, fully clothed, until morning. Occasional showers offered temporary respite from the oppressive weight of my thoughts, though the solitude of the small bathroom served as a stark reminder of the emptiness that pervaded my existence. As I caught sight of my reflection in the mirror, I couldn't help but notice the unruly growth of my beard, a physical manifestation of my neglect. Swiping my credit card at the bar to keep my tab current, I found myself sinking deeper into a pit of despair with each passing day. The familiar routine of ordering drinks and staring blankly at the dartboard provided little comfort, serving only to highlight the emptiness that consumed me. It was during one such afternoon, as I sat lost in thought, that two figures entered the inn, their presence a stark contrast to the subdued atmosphere. As they conversed quietly with the bartender, I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease wash over me, a premonition of impending trouble. Moments later, they approached me, their expressions grave as they requested a word. With a sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach, I followed them outside into the cool afternoon air, the sound of seagulls echoing in the distance. The bench was damp, but I hardly noticed as I sat down, facing the two gentlemen who had approached me. "So, what brings you here, gentlemen?" I inquired. They wasted no time in explaining their purpose. They had been searching for me for the past 10 days, and they were also on the hunt for Colin Farrell. They hoped I could provide some assistance. "Well, you found me, so that part of the puzzle is solved," I replied. "As for Colin Farrell, I haven't laid eyes on him since I arrived in this town. The bartender probably already filled you in on that. I've hardly budged from this spot since I checked in." We engaged in conversation for another hour. They had no charges to levy against me, and once they had ensured my safety, their focus shifted to the topic of Colin. They had traced my whereabouts through credit card charges, a mistake I vowed not to repeat in the future. After our discussion, I made my way downhill to purchase some fresh clothes and a toothbrush. Despite the unruly state of my beard, I decided to keep it for the time being. Following a final shower, I settled my bill and embarked on the journey home, making several stops along the way to delay my arrival. Upon reaching home, I found Peggy sitting on the couch, bathed in the glow of a single light in the dimly lit living room. She looked at me with apprehension, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Sensing her distress, I opted for a soda instead of a beer and took a seat across from her, waiting for her to speak. "The boys are spending the night at their friend's place. I thought we could have some time alone to talk," I suggested. "Why didn't you tell me before I found out?" she asked, her voice trembling with emotion. "I guess I was scared," I admitted. "Scared of how you'd react, what you'd do." "What happened?" she pressed, her eyes searching mine for answers. Taking a deep breath, I began to explain. "Remember what Colin did to me in high school? I've wanted to get back at him for that ever since. Saturday night at the party, I thought it was the perfect opportunity, so I set a trap for him." "That's not what I heard," she interrupted. "But, go on." "Like I said, it didn't go as planned, I confessed. I dressed up nicely, and Colin started flirting with me. I played along, letting him believe he was making progress. He suggested we go to the storeroom, and we kissed for a bit to keep up appearances. Then, he started touching my chest over my bra, so I decided to take action. I slipped off my panties and teased him with them, ensuring he was sufficiently aroused." "Why did you do that? What were you thinking?" "You ask." "I wanted to get back at him. I wanted him to pay for embarrassing me," I reply. "Anyway, I noticed he was excited, so I told him to take off his pants so we could have some fun. He did, and then I did something girls are never supposed to do." "All right, what on earth did you do?" "You inquire." I pointed at his stiff member and burst into laughter. I told him it was a sorry excuse for manhood, and that I wouldn't let anyone with such a tiny thing like that touch me. As I mocked him about his size, it started to shrink until it was completely limp. It was a mean thing to do, but it felt right in that moment. Keep going, you urge. I composed myself and headed for the door to leave. Bob, Ryan, and Freddie were waiting outside. Apparently, Colin had told them they could have a turn after him, and they were patiently waiting. I walked past them and went to the restroom, laughing. When I returned to the party, they were all standing around with smug grins on their faces. Apparently, they had spread the rumor to everyone at the party that they had been with me in the storeroom. They claimed it was payback for me humiliating Colin. I was upset and left, I admit. I heard you left with Colin. That's not true, you counter. I left alone and drove straight home. You left your underwear there for Colin, you accuse. No, I just forgot them when I left. Why didn't you tell me after they twisted everything? I got scared. I didn't know how to explain it to you, so you let me find out on my own in front of all my CO. I felt like a fool, as if I was being deceived. They teased me about what happened, and I couldn't even respond because I didn't know the truth. I had to learn from a secretary, and her version doesn't exactly match yours. She wasn't there, I was. What I told you is what happened. Darn it, Grady. I'm your wife. You were supposed to defend me and stand by me, Peggy said, her voice breaking as she went into the kitchen, softly sobbing. I sat there with my soda, watching as she leaned on the formica table and softly sobbed. I loved her more than anything. She was the only girl I ever cared about. She was giving me a bunch of lies and turning on the waterworks. Peggy had a plan to save our marriage. Sally had no reason to lie to me. I felt the urge to start questioning the whole idea of marriage. Sally had no reason to lie to me. I felt like I wanted to grill Peggy on every inconsistency in her story, but I chose not to. I couldn't change what had happened, and pushing Peggy to confess something she didn't want to wouldn't help. I did want to know the truth, but I wasn't going to get it from her. I decided to leave things as they were and let her relax. I took another shower and got into bed with my wife. She rested her head on my shoulder, whispered that she loved me, and we both drifted off to sleep. I still had a few days off before going back to work. The boys were happy to see me but kept their distance a bit. I suggested a trip to London, which they quickly agreed to. Peggy seemed pleased that the men in her family were bonding. During the drive to London, I learned that the boys had both been suspended for fighting, something we strongly disapproved of in our family. They reluctantly explained that they were getting teased about their mother's antics at the party and decided to put a stop to it. Some boys with big mouths ended up with bloody noses and black eyes. They kept the suspension from their mother, but asked me about what happened at the party. I postponed the conversation. We went to the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency, and I requested 3 applications. The boys were thrilled. It took an hour to complete all the paperwork. I had all the necessary documents, like birth records and passports. After each of us had a brief interview, they handed us medical forms to be filled out by a doctor. We went to Wagama for dinner and then headed home. We agreed not to say anything to their mother or friends. The physical exams were done the next day, and now all we had to do was wait. I always loved Peggy. She was the only girl. I found it hard to believe she could do something so low. Her actions seemed disgraceful and unforgivable. Despite that, I was still open to giving her a chance if she could somehow prove her story, though the chances seemed slim by the end of the week. Peggy made things worse by dropping a bombshell during breakfast one morning. Grady, I've been thinking. I want to have another baby. Let's put this in context. Peggy had been on birth control pills for years, but about 3 years ago, she stopped due to side effects. We weren't using any other form of birth control. Shortly after, I visited the doctor for a shoulder issue and also asked about getting a vasectomy. In just 20 minutes, I was sterile. I didn't see a reason to tell Peggy about it. For the past 3 years, Peggy and I had been having unprotected contact without birth control, and she never questioned why she wasn't getting pregnant. Now suddenly, she wanted to have a baby, as if by magic. Either she's incredibly naive or she thinks I am. I played along with her suggestion, though I was surprised. As a man, I'm not an expert on pregnancy, but since it had been almost 3 weeks since the party, Peggy might have missed her period and was trying to cover it up. This made me rethink things, so I decided to change my plans. The boys were at school, and I talked to them before they left. They seemed to understand the situation with their mother better than I did. Having their support made me feel better, even though I wasn't sure what would happen next. I spent most of the day searching for Colin Farrell. He had to be somewhere. During lunch, I spoke to Sally at the docks. but she had no information about Colin. There was a rumor that he feared I'd seek revenge, which didn't add up because I was usually peaceful. I steered clear of where they worked to avoid bumping into my 3 tormentors later that day. I visited a local lawyer to begin the divorce paperwork with Peggy. I didn't want to hurt her, but I couldn't continue living with her, especially with the boys soon to be on their own. I saw no reason to stay. One issue I couldn't shake was the urge to thank Colin and his friends for ruining my marriage. I knew Peggy was mostly at fault, but I couldn't take it out on her. Her lovers needed to face consequences for their actions. Freddie Springer, one of them, always stopped by MC Murray for a drink before heading home. It was dusk when he exited the bar's side door and walked toward his car at the back. I caught him off guard, grabbed his arm, and twisted it behind his back, slamming him into the wall. Despite his struggles, I kept him pinned and started hitting his kidneys with my other fist until his shoulder popped out of its socket. Knocking him down onto the cobblestones, I calmly strolled to my car and drove off. 2 hours later, Peggy was completing the paperwork for my release on bail, using the house as collateral. Alice Springer burst in, demanding I be locked up forever, but Peggy managed to calm her down. Freddie suffered injuries, including a dislocated shoulder, broken nose, 2 black eyes, and internal injuries, but none life-threatening. My wife and I didn't discuss the incident, and I slept on the couch for the first time in 20 years. The next morning, I was trying to figure out my next move when I learned about a job opportunity aboard the Osaka Maru. Captain Jose Costa agreed to take me on if I sorted out my papers. On my way home, Ray Collins attacked me with a 2x4, injuring me. Acting on instinct, I fought back until bystanders pulled me off. In the hospital, Peggy was displeased with my involvement in the altercation. I insisted I didn't provoke the attack and demanded a better explanation of what happened that Saturday. Peggy left as the doctor entered, confirming my injuries were mostly minor. Ray was in worse condition, with a broken collarbone and his jaw wired shut. No charges were filed against me since witnesses confirmed Ray's aggression. I took sick leave and prepared for my upcoming divorce, entrusting everything to Peggy and conceding the house to her. Alongside the divorce papers, I included my vasectomy records and a recent material count report. Making calls to friends in Scotland and hitting the gym to recuperate from the 2x4 assault, I sought solace. Henry Clark, reluctant to see me depart, pledged to maintain discretion for as long as possible. Entrusting him with watching over my boys if necessary, I beseeched him. Meanwhile, Peggy's absence from the gym and the deteriorating state of the house were evident. Laundry accumulated, the household descended into disarray, with hastily prepared meals and lackluster conversations. It appeared Peggy was regressing, evident in her weight gain. In just 4 weeks, everything spiraled downhill. The following day, my sons handed me my maritime papers, exuberant with anticipation. Though I urged them to complete the school year before making any decisions, I doubted they truly heard me. Sorting out necessities aboard the Osaka Maru, I acquired a list from the quartermaster for the forthcoming morning's sail. Upon settling into my cabin, I disembarked from the ship for the final time. Robert had left his motorcycle stationed at the dock's edge. It proved to be an arduous 8-hour journey to Aberdeen, the motorcycle's incessant tremors obscuring the odometer. Despite the smooth engine and favorable weather, reaching my destination brought immense relief. Meeting my friends, we rendezvoused at the Four Crowns, the men's room located at the rear accessible from outside. After briefly confirming my presence within, I awaited outside as Bob emerged, the door clicking shut behind him as he made his way towards the restroom. I seized his right arm, guiding him down the alleyway, his face scraping against the unforgiving stone. After about 50 feet, I halted, propping him against the wall. He whimpered in pain, blood streaming from his right eye socket, his cheekbone visible beneath the blood-stained flesh. "Please, Grady, spare me," he pleaded, his voice a mixture of groans and tears. I had no intention of ending him, but I saw no need to reassure him of that. "Here's the deal, Bob," I began, my tone firm. "Tell me the truth about what happened at the party, and you'll live. Lie to me, and it's over for you." Okay, I'll talk," he whimpered, his body racked with pain. "I'm hurting, Grady." "Talk, and I'll arrange for a doctor," I assured him. He recounted Peggy's arrival at the party without me, describing Colin's excitement and boasts about his intentions with her. Peggy, he noted, looked stunning, seemingly ready for a good time. Colin plied her with drinks, boasting about potential sloppy seconds. Skeptical, they followed Colin and Peggy to the storeroom, overhearing intimate noises emanating from behind the door. "Keep going," I urged, unmoved by his pleas for mercy. Bob continued, describing the scene in vivid detail, emphasizing their voluntary participation and Peggy's apparent enjoyment. "We never harmed her," Grady, he insisted. "We never forced her to do anything she didn't want to do." His account aligned closely with Sally's narrative, diverging significantly from Peggy's version of events. Gazing at his battered face in the dim light, I pressed further, inquiring about Colin's whereabouts. His denial lacked conviction, his battered appearance a testament to the punishment he endured. Leaving him behind, I bid farewell to familiar faces at the pub before mounting my bike. A few miles down the road, the sight of an ambulance racing toward the pub signaled the early morning's tumultuous aftermath. After parking the motorcycle where I found it and boarding the Osaka Maru, I left Robert with the task of retrieving the bike later. My first shift wasn't until that night, so I spent the remainder of the day recuperating from the taxing journey. The motorcycle had taken its toll on me. In hindsight, opting for the car would have been wiser. Several hours later, I awoke, showered, and grabbed some dinner before receiving a briefing from my supervisor regarding my job duties. Left to my own devices, I found the entry-level tasks manageable, though my CO workers proved less than amiable. While they would respond to direct inquiries, they offered no assistance beyond that. Attempting to forge connections with the crew proved futile. Despite their apparent camaraderie, I felt like an outsider. Opting for patience, I resolved to wait it out. Peggy should have received her divorce papers by now, and Bob Timbers likely shared his version of events with the authorities. Meanwhile, my sons seemed to find amusement in the recent upheavals, exchanging snickers amongst themselves. After concluding my shift, I retired for the night. 2 days later, I was summoned to the captain's office. Captain Costa's displeased expression was evident as he addressed me. "Mr. Baxter, the Royal Navy has requested permission to land a helicopter on the Osaka Maru to transport you back to the mainland," he informed me, referencing a detailed wire he had received that morning outlining the extradition request. He continued, summarizing the accusations leveled against me. From charges related to the disappearance of Colin Farrell to severe assault allegations involving Fred Springer and Ray Collins, the list was damning. Additionally, skipping bail on a prior charge and allegations of assaulting Bob Timbers in Aberdeen added to the weight of the accusations.